I'm Eric Barnes with the Daily Memphian, and welcome to The Sidebar, the weekly show on the community, arts, culture, and more. Today, we're talking to Jacques Osmo and Dr. Lynn Dobrons about the Osmo Institute for Neuroaesthetics at UTHSC. We'll talk a bunch more about what all that means. But first, a special thanks to our sponsor, Tresement Manor. And I'll start with you, Jacques. Welcome back. We've had you here before.
Thank you so very much.
And your
so
presence
nice
you've done columns and reviews and so on for Daily Memphian, as well as a show on WYXR.
I'm a big fan.
Yeah, you're a big fan. Talk for a second, real quickly, and then we'll go deeper into it, what this institute is and how it kind of comes out of various work you've been doing.
All right. Well, the Institute basically looks at the way the arts affect our health, brain, and behavior, and uses the science to heal our bodies and look at the ways that we can improve our society.
Okay. And so we'll talk much more about what that means and your background as a musician, as a conductor, and so on. But let me bring in Lynn. You're relatively new to Memphis, a year or less at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center.
Yes.
Talk about your role there and how it intersects with this institute.
Yes, so I came to Memphis in October, and I'm so pleased to be here and to be at University of Tennessee Health Science Center. I am the chair of the Department of Anatomy and Neurobiology and director of the Neuroscience Institute at University of Tennessee.
Yeah, and so your background, I was reading a little bit, but talk about your background and then how it leads to your interest in what the Institute's doing.
Yes, so my background is in biomedical engineering and neuroscience, and I have been a neuroscientist for about 30 years now, doing research in various aspects of things related to how does the brain work and how is it important for behavior in health and disease. And I'm so excited to be partnering with Jacques and the Osmo Institute related to neuroaesthetics. Neuroaesthetics is such an exciting field and really a great interaction with neuroscience because of the effects of music and the arts on the brain is such an exciting field.
When we think about, I think about the kinds of things I think I was looking at your bio, and you've done work around PTSD and around anxiety.
Yes.
And this is just, you can completely correct me and it will not hurt my feelings. You can just say, Eric, that's a dumb thing to say. It won't hurt my feelings. Because it won't be the first time I've said a dumb thing. But when I think about anxiety and PTSD, I think one, there's been this huge kind of awakening over the last 10 years, if not fully, but more awareness, more conversation. My kids in their 20s and their peers, much more open about talking about these kinds of things.
Absolutely.
People talk about being in therapy in a way that when I was in my 20s, that was like, you didn't talk about it if you were. So there's sort of, to deal with it, there are things like therapy, talk therapy, as people sometimes call it, medication, people make life changes. How does this fit into the treatment of those kinds of things or any, sort of disorder or issues? Is it instead of therapy and medication and the other things that we've done, or is it in addition to, or am I totally going down the wrong road?
No, you are absolutely right. It would be in addition to, not instead of. There is, it's true, and it's a very good thing that there's more openness to talk about anxiety and disorders, mental health disorders. It's also concerning that there is a big rise in the incidence of these, and especially in young people. Anxiety levels in young people are so high right now, and there's a need for better treatments. And better treatments in multiple areas. So medication is one area of treatment. Talk therapy is extremely important. And there's a need for other types of treatment. And so, for example, neuroaesthetics, the use of music and art and sound to try and alleviate anxiety as an assistive and could end up being, for some people, the only type of therapy that's needed. And for others, working together with other types of therapies, such as medication and talk therapy, behavioral therapy.
As I go back to Jacques, I should say we are still recording in Crosstown in the central atrium on the 10th floor, and we timed this perfectly where there's some classical music playing in the background. And so...
Oh, absolutely. I think it's very fitting. I feel this rising joy in me as we speak.
Yeah. And hopefully everyone can hear as that happens. Again, we got flooded, for those who've lost track, we got flooded out of our regular podcast studio in January. And so we're kind of making up as we go along, as we get back into regular office space. But talk about, like, your background, and again, how you came to this as a kind of, I don't want to pigeonhole as a treatment, but as this approach to healing and so on.
Well, actually, so in terms of my background, music and arts have always played such a significant role in my family. Just to not even include anybody else, I myself was a war refugee. I was born in former Yugoslavia, and it was very clear to me from the beginning the effect and help that one can get from music and arts in general. It's on the physiological level, on psychological level, even looking at the society at the time. I remember looking at around me in the initial stages of the war, and even the different sides in that conflict who grew to really hate each other, somehow could not stop listening to each other's music. So in terms of social cohesion, it was this big aha moment for me. But also, quite honestly, in the way that music affects us psychologically, physiologically, I was a case study for myself. And then later on, I learned about the scientific underpinnings of all of that. And it just became inevitable that this will be the field that I will go into.
Yeah, and we should say, we don't have to dwell, but you were born in Yugoslavia, and do, if you don't mind, the quick 30 seconds or more of that history, just so people know which conflicts you're talking about. And so on.
So I grew up in former Yugoslavia, in Bosnia and Herzegovina. There was a civil war there in the 90s, and then I left as the only member of my family that managed to escape the conflict. In the end, I left as a refugee. And I became a Canadian, then I lived in Los Angeles, London, and then I came to Memphis.
Yeah, and we'll talk a bit more about the musical side of your life, although not that this isn't the musical side of your life. So one of the things for you, Lynn, I think most people who like music, and WXR is fundamentally a music station with some talk, and I'm a big music person. I can't play a note, but I love music. I think most people who like music know that that's a place, maybe a safe place to calm down if you had a bad day, or get yourself riled up if you're trying to do something. I mean, music plays this role that we think of in layman's terms, as psychological. But I think part of what is it that what we're learning is it's more than just a feel-good thing, that there is these byproducts of music and art on the brain beyond that just feeling some of us have, or most people have, about music and art.
Yes, that's correct. And I love music. I love listening to music on your station. I have been a musician, not anywhere at the level of Jacques, but an amateur musician. I've sung with choirs. I've experienced the joy of making music and listening to music, and as most people have. And it's more than that. It's really understanding that music and the arts can have long-lasting effects on the brain that can lead to changes in people's mood and behavior and health. And really, there is some great research about that, and the need for much more research to really understand what's happening in the brain and how to use music and the arts for making changes in the brain that lead to lasting health.
One of the things, not to get too wonky, and again, you correct me wherever you need to on this, but isn't there more and more research that, let's say it's around therapy? So if someone has experienced PTSD, some kind of childhood trauma, some war trauma, whatever, that literally there's a rewiring of the brain.
Yes.
And that therapy, talk therapy, can undo that negative rewiring, right? And is that part of what you're finding or hoping to find or proven it with music, that it kind of it undoes some of that bad wiring that happened from the traumatic or repeatedly traumatic event?
Yes, absolutely. So there are studies showing that there's changes in the wiring of the brain. There are biochemical changes in the brain, long-lasting biochemical changes in the brain that can cause people to suffer anxiety and other PTSD symptoms decades later. And talk therapy is one mechanism, and talk therapy has helped a lot of people. Behavioral therapy has helped a lot of people. And there are some people for whom it doesn't help. There's a need for additional treatments. And yes, there's research showing and need for additional research to really look into the mechanisms of how music, sound, the arts affect the brain directly, affect that rewiring, affect those biochemical changes to try and reverse some of the negative changes that trauma can have. And it's really interesting. Not everyone who experiences trauma gets PTSD. And so what are some of the things that contribute to resilience in the face of trauma? And absolutely, music, arts, experiences like that. And I can see you, Jacques. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yes, please.
No, I can absolutely attest it firsthand that, I mean, as you are going through the process, there are certain things that music does psychologically. It provides a safe space. It helps us express ourselves. It reminds you of your identity outside of the context of adversity. Really helps you just feel that there is future because it reminds you of who you are. Psychologically, this helps greatly to overcome trauma. And you don't really ever completely overcome trauma, but you are not affected by PTSD necessarily. It's your reaction to trauma. But also, I mean, chemically, just in terms of the neural mechanisms based on which this works, if you can imagine right now, the sounds that we hear are really only in our heads. What exists with all of this beautiful playing from downstairs, it's only really sound vibrations, which reach our ear and then trigger certain processes in our mind, which then affect chemicals such as cortisol, stress hormone, dopamine, serotonin, various things that make us feel a certain way. And that can be that can be used in a controlled way to help you get through different difficulties and make you feel a certain way. Yeah. So there's a huge benefit in this and also huge potential in developing methods and technologies that can apply music and sound to healing.
We'll talk more about all that. Let me take a moment, though, and remind everyone that I'm Eric Barnes, and this is The Sidebar. It airs on WYXR 91.7 every Thursday at 11:30. Focus on the community, arts, culture, everything in between. But it's not just a radio show. It's one of many weekly podcasts we do at the Daily Memphian, including the food podcast, Soundbites, that Holly Whitfield has been hosting along with Chris Harrington. But Jennifer Chandler, our food writer who's come over to join the Daily Memphian, she'll be on. I think she was on last week. She'll be on this week. Oh, no, she'll be on this week. Will be her first appearance and then taking over hosting duties over the coming weeks. That show also airs on WYXR every Thursday at 11. We also have the Memphis Grizzlies podcast that Chris Harrington and Drew Hill host, as well as periodically On the Record, a politics podcast that Bill Dries and sometimes Sam Hardiman do. All of our podcasts are on the Daily Memphian site, as well as iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get the WYXR shows, this one, Sidebar, as well as Soundbites, at wyxr.org, or you can download the WYXR app. It includes all the talk shows. It includes all the music shows, archives of the music shows from the various DJs. So it's a great way to keep up with what's going on WYXR. Also consider becoming a supporter of WYXR. It's nonprofit, listener-supported radio. You can do a one-off donation. You can become a member and get all kinds of member benefits. All that's on the website or on the app. I should also mention that the Daily Memphian is a nonprofit newsroom. It is the largest newsroom in the area and very much supported by your paid subscription. So if you haven't become a paid subscriber, please do, or you can also become a donor at dailymemphian.com. Last, I think I left out that Behind the Headlines, which we do with the good folks over at WKNO, that is also available as one of our podcasts on the Daily Memphian site or wherever you get your podcasts. Coming up, soon, next week, I think, Rose Smith from the Brooks, one of the assistant curators over there, will be on Sidebar talking about an exhibit and some work going on over there. We recently had I Make Mad Beats, the producer and musician, on with Kelly English, the restaurateur. That was a great conversation, I think just last week. We also did a two episodes, I should say, with Matt Ross Spang, the producer, Grammy Award-winning engineer, producer, with his studio here in Crosstown. I mentioned behind the headlines, we've got Marie Fagans, the new school superintendent, coming on in the next couple of weeks, as well as a group of the suburban superintendents are coming on. And recently we had DA Mulroy on the show, talk about all the things he's got going on in his office. Tell me, I don't know, I'll go to you first, Jacques. What is the Institute? I mean, is it an office? Is it a clinic? Is it what is the Institute made up of?
All right. So, first, the Institute, so it's set up as an organization dedicated to developing methods and technologies that apply arts to therapeutic purposes and community improvement. It is also set up as a collaborative hub for interdepartmental and interinstitutional collaboration. In this area, we are very lucky to have an office space in the Department of Anatomy and Neurobiology. And then we function also in the context of different sites in terms of clinical research, in terms of practical applications throughout the city.
Okay. Is that how you would describe it, Lynn?
So that was an excellent description, and it really is a nonprofit organization that will facilitate both research and practice and treatment and experience for people throughout the community. And we're just so fortunate to have Jacques Osmo, and with his expertise in both music and neuroaesthetics, wanting to be here in Memphis and building this organization and all of these great efforts in Memphis. Memphis is such a wonderful city for music, and it's really a great partnership. And we're so excited at University of Tennessee Health Science Center, as we're growing neuroscience at UTHSC, to be able to partner with him. It's really a terrific partnership.
And are there other things? You're at University of Alabama, Birmingham,
yes.
the big medical school there for many years.
24 years.
24 years.
Yes.
So you've been in this, I don't want to call it industry, but for lack of a better word, this profession and the world of academia for quite some time now. Are there other of these sort of collaborations and this focus on music in other places, or is this a first of its kind, one of a kind? How does that all fit?
So it's one of the first of its kind, but there are others at places like Johns Hopkins and University of California. This is something that is really exciting and generating a lot of interest nationwide and worldwide. And we have an opportunity here as one of the first to really be a leader in this area.
Yeah. For you, Jacques, you've been moving towards this for some time, talking about this. You and I have talked about some of these concepts before. You were doing some work with cancer patients. Do I have that right? Talk about kind of some of the beginnings of this beyond your own background and your background as a musician, as a conductor, and so on.
Well, quite frankly, I started my work in this general area at the end of 2019, when David Schwartz, the chair of radiation oncology at the UTHSC, University of Tennessee Health Science Center, invited me to bring music and sound in some way into his radiation oncology clinic at the time. And he was interested in developing methods that go beyond the standard framework of music therapy. So I started doing that, and then the pandemic hit, that some things went on pause, and I took a couple of steps back to really think about this idea a little bit more, because I sensed this tremendous potential in Memphis for a really large-scale initiative in this field. One of the first things that I noticed, which we all know about Memphis now, there's one thing the city has that has the ability to transcend the boundaries, to transcend socio-economic, political, racial, ethnic, religious boundaries, and that's the city's music. I don't think there's a person in the city that you will ask, well, regardless of all their other interests, do you like music? I don't think there's anybody that will say, oh, no, I don't. So the potential of developing basically scientific research and economic sector in this city that draws on this universal love of music and the arts within this city, that has the ability to bring this entire city together. I've been creating a network of the leading educational, research, cultural institutions, religious institutions, artists, businesses, and so on, who will all take part in this, both in terms of practical application, in terms of research, in terms of creating jobs and paths to employment, Memphis-wide. It became obvious to me after a while that this is the place where we can do something truly remarkable within this area.
Yeah.
So that is how the idea for the Institute came about as an independent organization, because that way it would also be a little bit easier to create partnerships with across the board within Memphis. And that is what is happening right now.
Yeah. Come back to UT. Do you, Lynn, see more, it'll be students, it'll be researchers, it'll be other faculty, it'll be all of them kind of interacting with the Institute, or how does that kind of play out?
All of the above.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there'll be opportunities for students to get involved in the activities that the Neuroaesthetic Institute is doing. There'll be opportunities for faculty. We're working to create collaborations for additional research between faculty that trainees would be involved, students and postdoctoral researchers, clinicians and fundamental scientists, and residents, medical students, all of the above will have opportunities to be involved in this.
With a couple minutes left, what else have I missed? Because I'm going to shift gears slightly on you both. But what have I missed anything else on the Institute that we haven't gotten to?
Well, this was the gist of it. But just to mention, so it's an institute for neuroaesthetics. And neuroaesthetics is an emergent scientific field that includes not only music, it's architecture, visual arts, dance. So, and there are numerous parallels in terms of neurological and biological mechanisms through which these different art forms affect us. There are various parallels between these artistic disciplines. So while the music and medicine is our flagship program, we are looking at including the entire Memphis cultural community.
Yeah. So the same benefits and the same changes that you're talking about with music can come from painting, from dance, from all these, from whether that's playing it or experiencing it. Yes? No? Maybe?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And there is research data on that and opportunities for additional research to explore that. But yes, art, painting, dance, other types of
all the arts. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Because just to mention, I mean, there are, of course, all of that is included, both experiencing it and participating. For example, if you look at the scan fMRI of the brain, when we are talking to each other, only some of the areas will be lit up. You know, there's a degree of interest there. If you were listening to music right now, your entire brain would be lit up. So it's working so many different parts of your brain, not only auditory centers, but visual and motor and so on. If you start making music in addition to listening it, it's really a super workout for your brain with so many different health benefits.
Yeah. Let me, just a couple minutes left here. I'll do this for each of you. I'll start with you, Jacques. Why music? You've told this story to me before, and I've heard you, but for people who haven't heard you before, how did you end up being a musician and a conductor, and why did music become central to your life?
Well, I naturally gravitated towards it since I was little. In terms of music as a profession, you see, I went through a number of disciplines. My first degree was architecture. In terms of my education, later my master's and doctorate is musical performance and music history with double major in art history. So I went through different disciplines, and music is the most studied and most efficient artistic medium in terms of the way it affects our brain and the way it affects our body. I have a colleague in the UK who is a very renowned scientist, and he told me that they did at University College London international study where 95% of people admitted to crying to music. And crying is a very complex process. People don't, you can cry when reading poetry, you can cry. You don't really cry when looking at a piece of architecture. You don't necessarily cry.
Unless it's really bad. Then you're just kind of broken.
Then
like,
you're
how did that
desperation.
happen?
Desperation.
That's a different
You
kind.
don't necessarily cry when you're looking at a picture, but you cry when you listen to music. So the music's ability to really affect us physiologically, psychologically, is very likely the greatest among these different artistic disciplines.
And for you, Lynn, why science? Why you started, was it biology? Did I have that right?
Biomedical engineering.
Biomedical engineering.
Yes.
Why science?
So as a kid, loved science and math. My uncle was a biomedical engineer doing research and a medical inventor, and just seeing the work that he did inspired me to pursue biomedical engineering. And then I got involved in research and really loved it. The opportunity to make discoveries about how the brain works that could potentially lead to treatments for people. And really just by nature, I'm a curious person, always asking questions, wanting to know how things work. And so science was a great fit for that.
And, in the course of your career, the changes, I mentioned therapy, I mentioned, the rise of the various antidepressants to deal with anxiety and PTSD. Other things you've been involved in, though, I've probably limited the experiences you've had and the research you've done over that 25 years. All the scan, MRI scans, all these things that have happened over the last 25 years. How has that all affected and changed what you do?
So there have been a lot of changes to the techniques that we have available in science, and in particular to study the brain. So it's been such an exciting time to be a neuroscientist, and even more so now. We have better techniques for understanding what's happening in the brain, imaging the activity of brain circuits, how different regions of the brain are talking to one another, but also really manipulating the brain at the level of individual pathways and types of cells and what molecules are being released and how they're affecting neural circuits and behavior. And that has really, especially over the last 10 years, just exploded. And then also the genetics, understanding the genes and the molecules and genetic changes that influence the brain. Really small genetic changes that can have profound effects on brain development and behavior. So all of that has been really what's been changing. And then right now, we just have amazing tools for investigating the brain and hopefully leading to new treatments.
Okay. We're almost completely out of time. I always ask, and I've asked you before, what was your first concert?
What was my first what?
Your first concert, which is a tough question for you. So most people would say, oh, I saw Michael Jackson at, the Coliseum or something like that. But for you, it's an interesting question.
I do remember.
Okay.
It was U2.
Okay.
That came to our city. And the performance was, it's very interesting. The performance was on the soccer stadium that the building where I live overlooks. So we went on the balcony and we watched U2 concert.
That's pretty great.
That's really little.
That's a really great one. For you, first concert you ever attended?
I don't remember for sure which was my first concert, but one of the early ones was Jackson Browne.
Nice.
Love Jackson Browne.
Yeah, okay.
And have seen him many places every chance I get.
Okay. Well, thank you both very much, and congratulations on the Institute. But that is all the time we have this week. If you missed any of the show today, you can go to wyxr.org, or you can go to the Daily Memphian, or you can go to wherever you get your podcasts to get the full episode. That is all the time we have this week, though. Thanks very much, and we'll see you next week.